So I was browsing Reddit and someone posted comments saying where to start as a beginner. I gave my 2 cents and said I was going to make a video on it. This isn't that video, however, I thought I would do a brief video basically covering the approach to hacking a box or hack the box, rather than a tutorial of me hacking a singular box, and really just give you an insight into how to approach that kind of stuff. This will be a 3 or 4 part series. I'm going to split up into bits and pieces so you can easily digest it, and hopefully that will be helpful. But before we do any hacking of any sort, we need to first of all know where we're going to be hacking from. So I have VMware. VMware is used to basically virtualize a machine. So you can, for example, virtualize a Windows machine. I'm virtualizing a Linux machine, or in more specifically, Kali Linux. Now, if you look at Kali Linux here, this is a website. It's the most advanced penetration test distribution. Basically, what that means is it's a Linux machine with penetration tools that will basically streamline all of the hacking stuff you may ever need to do. Which, in my case, is what I use on the daily, and honestly, it's super solid, so I recommend you use it. All right, so then we have Parrot as an alternative. So Parrot is basically Kali, but I guess more stylish. I prefer Kali just because it seems to support things better, but you can use whatever you want to. Next we have in the Windows category, because I explained to you Kali, but there's also Windows as an alternative as well. You can use Windows basically to do all of those Windowsy bits and pieces you can't do on a Linux machine. For example, say you need to decompile an executable, and you need to basically be able to decompile it, tweak it, run it, etc. Or maybe you just need to be in a Windows environment. It's important to have a Windows machine. I personally recommend Commando VM, which basically is basically like you just run a PowerShell script. You have to adjust some things, run a PowerShell script, and then it will install it all for you. It's super simple, and all the work's done for you. You can see here, if I go ahead and just remove this, you can see how I have Commando. If I go into my folder, go to local disk, you can see there should be a million tools in here. There's just so much stuff. So you can see here we have, like, for example, AS Threat Roast. And I'm going to demonstrate that in further videos too. So going back to operating systems, next we need to say, well, okay, so let's say we picked our operating system. We have, let's say, Kali, for example. How do we run Kali? Well, I don't really advise you just, install the ISO onto a USB stick and boot it up that way. I recommend you use VMware. So VMware basically is what I'm using right now. VMware will allow you to virtualize your Linux machine. It is a little bit of it's a little bit tedious to actually get the download to VMware. So if you don't want to go through that, or you want, say, a free alternative, there's also Oracle's VirtualBox. Both work fantastically. I use VMware because it's just what my company pay for, and also I just prefer, I'm more used to it, so yeah, but you have the option of 2. Okay, so what's next on my agenda? So platforms. I know this is kind of a how to hack the box video, but honestly, it's maybe more helpful if I show you what else there is before you go ahead and just, go in the deep end. So we have Hackthebox. Here's some points, basically. It's challenging, there's no guidance, it's self-directed learning. Now, this doesn't account for the starter labs. They will give you guidance, but after that, you're pretty much on your own. There's tryhackme, which is beginner-friendly. There's a lot of guidance. It's less self-directed, it's more by the book. This is fine, but honestly, I find that learning in the deep end is better. You have portswigger Academy for web app stuff. Basically, if you want to learn web apps, then 100% recommend that. Pentest Lab and Pentest Academy, these cover basically like more specific things. So, for example, Pentest Lab, I believe, covers a bunch of web stuff, and Academy covers quite high level, quite complicated stuff. For example, there's some really good stuff on their AD, Active Directory pen testing. And then finally, we have Cybrary, which is more of like it's basically like a platform for videos and stuff and tutorials, a bit like what I'm doing right now, except it's a company. I'll go ahead and show you those now real quick, just so you can have actually look at them. So we have tryhackme. Like I say, it's a lot more beginner friendly, and if that's what you're interested in, go for it. We have portswigger's Web Academy, basically just learning web apps. Pentest Lab, basically massive web apps too, and then Academy. This website is more, like I say, a bit more advanced, but certainly worth checking out if you're into that kind of stuff. It's also quite expensive for $250 a year. And then we have Cybrary, which you can download for free, but there is a paid version. All right, so now we've covered that, let's move on to some more juicy bits. So let's say you just done Hackthebox. What do you do, right? You know, that's kind of like the beginner's woe. You're not really gonna know. You're gonna have issues starting. You can say, well, how do I connect to the VPN? How do I actually hack a box, right? So let's go ahead and basically go through the whole process. So I already have a Hackthebox account. In my case, I'm not gonna mess around creating an account. You can see here I have an account. So if I go to my account here, you can see here's my account. If I go over to starting point, you can see here that basically this will give me an insight as to how to how to get into it. So we have tier 0, tier 1, and tier 2. This is basically the first machine. I don't know if you need VIP to view this, but basically what it will do is it will show you how to connect to the VPN and spawn it. I'm not going to demonstrate that in this video since I'm not sure if it goes with the terms of service with Hackthebox, and also I don't think you're going to get the best value from me going through that. So I thought I'd basically just show you that this exists, and you go ahead and check out for yourself and maybe use it in line with my tutorial or my demonstration. Then we have another page I found, how to become a pen tester. This is actually quite a new post, I believe. Yeah, September 30th, so it's only like a month or two old now. And basically what it covers is all the basics of how to get into it. And I found this yesterday, so I was like, I'm going to go ahead and include it. And just it covers a bunch of stuff, so we recommend you go ahead and check that out. Again, for beginners, it's about having as much information as you can get, so you can go ahead and actually make some progress. Okay, so how do we download the VPN, right? So if I go to connect to the VPN, there should be an option to download the VPN. In my case, I'm not going to do that because I already have it and it will override my current VPN. But the point is basically what it is we go ahead and download the VPN and then we put our VPN inside our machine. In my case, say my Kali Linux machine. I'm not going to do a video. This video won't cover how to install it, but what it will cover is basically just the gap between. All right, so now let's assume we've downloaded the VPN and we put it into our, say, Kali Linux box. How do we run it? So in order to do that, I have an alias basically, which when I type in hack, actually let me just go ahead and remove this. This is if I go ahead and run hack, go ahead and just move this out of the way. When I run hack, it runs sudo openvpn and then the path to the openvpn file. The reason I use sudo is because you need to run it as a privileged user, root in my case, for it to work. If I go ahead and say run that, you'll now see that I'm going to get a bunch of VPN contents out. If I now go ahead and access the machine. Now, in my case, I'm going to demonstrate the machine pivot API. You can see it's here. This is an insane rated machine. Basically, the reason I'm using this one is because it has a few interesting ports open, and also it's due to be retired tomorrow, so I don't think Hackthebox will mind me so much doing an active box. Alright, so before we do anything, we need to basically see, well, we've connected to the VPN, but have we actually connected to the VPN properly? So we can use a tool called Nmap. Now, Nmap basically will let us, it basically is a port scanner. It does a lot more than that, but it's intrinsically a port scanner. If I now go ahead and say Nmap, the name of the host. Now, actually, before we go ahead and do that, I need to go and show you how to actually add a host. So in my case, I go sudo nano etc hosts. What this will do is it will basically create a host entry. So if you're familiar with DNS, basically where you will have like a host name to an IP lookup, you do the same here, except this is local. When your Kali Linux machine when your Linux machine sees this host, it will then convert this host name into its IP equivalent based on your etc host file. In my case, I have the IP and I have the host name. If I change this to say pivot API 123, for example, and then I type in up here, it will do the same thing basically. Alright, so let's get out of here. And let's go ahead and run some Nmap. So you've seen here, I've ran Nmap on the host, and it says it's down. Well, why is it down? Well, first of all, the reason it's not pairing up is because we need to add in the -pn flag. Now, the reason this is important, as you'll see here, it says here, hostname is down if it is really up, but blocking that ping approach try PN. Now, this is a Windows machine. Now, often Windows machines, or by default at least, don't allow you to ping them. They have a ping exempt to be set to on, basically, where if you try ping them, they won't reply. Simply. And Nmap often uses pings to say, hey, are you alive? And in this case, this Windows machine basically didn't reply because it has pings disabled. The -pn flag will actually ignore this and basically just it will just say, okay, I don't care if you have ping or not, you know, you're up for me, and it will basically view the ports. So here we've run a very, very basic Nmap scan. Now, when I say an Nmap scan, what I mean is basically this Nmap tool has basically sent a bunch of requests to this host on a number of different ports, say port 21, 22, and all that kind of stuff. Said, hey, are you alive? Are you open? Will you reply to me, kind of thing. The Windows host has then replied to those requests, and Nmap has been able to at least detect some of the ports. So that's kind of Nmap to a brief description. Basically, Nmap will be used to find the holes in the system. And when I say holes, I don't mean vulnerabilities, I just mean basically open services, right? Alright, so we've ran Nmap. Now, what do we do next? Well, this is great. It tells us what ports open. We want to run some more in-depth stuff, right? So what I'm going to go and do is I'm going to go ahead and cat an existing Nmap. So in my case, this is one I ran before, and we can go ahead and view it, basically. Now, this machine has got a few ports open with a few interesting services. So in my case, when it comes to reviewing it, it's going to be a lot more text, but when you read and understand it, it's really not complicated. So we're running the nmap command, nmap-vvv. That basically means give me as much information as you can about the system, as in as much logging information. -p says, hey, I want you to do it on these ports. If you're not familiar with a port, basically, a port is what a service may listen on. For example, when you access a website using HTTP, it will be running on port 80. Often, if you access a web application on or a website on SSL, as in HTTPS, it will be on port 443. You can't see either of those ports in here because there isn't a web application running, and nor is it running on SSL either. Anyways, next we have the SC flag, basically means default scripts, and SV means enumerate versions. What this means basically is Nmap will run certain tooling, certain scripts with this command. So it will say, hey, FTP is open. I want you to run the FTP anonymous script, right? And then the FTP anonymous script has pulled this information back, right? The SV will say, hey, give me the version. Now, for example, FTP doesn't have a version, but if we scroll down, maybe we can see some other versions, though I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, so the SV here is pulled down Microsoft SQL Server 2019, and then the version, right? So that's basically given us the version of the service that's running, and that's important because maybe it's vulnerable. Okay, so now we've covered that, let's look at the checklist to see what else there is. Okay, so we've covered the top here. We've looked at the starter labs, we've downloaded the VPN, we've connected to the Hackthebox VPN, we've added the machine to the Etsy host, we've confirmed it works, and some Windows hosts not liking pings, we demonstrate how to bypass that. Alright, so I've showed you Nmap, basically. It's a simple port scanner. It can pull down ports, and it can be used to enumerate what's on the machine. We have then Nmap scripts. Now, I did cover this briefly, but basically, this is Nmap running a normal, hey, this port is open, and this is an Nmap script that has run. I'll show you the difference. So, if I go ahead and minimize, and I go to Nmap, Nmap, box, tab. In my case, I've set the $box variable to equal this string. That's why it does that. It won't for you. And I type in, say, port-p21 that says, hey, I want you to talk at port 21. It's going to come back and say, port 21 FTP is open. Actually, maybe it won't. I just add the pn. And now we can see, yeah, port 21 FTP is open. But that's not much information, right? We want to look at a bit more. So what we could do is we could then say --script equals FTP, I think it was like anon or something like that. It was. And now we've run this, basically now it's going to give us the anonymous login. Now what this means is basically FTP supports scripts. In this case we said, hey, I want you to run this certain script on the host, and what it will do is it will then basically try and log on to FTP anonymously. Okay, so that's one example of the script, but there are loads more. If we go to locate.nse, and then grep will say FTP, These are a number of the scripts. We ran this one using this command here. And what that did is, like I say, it basically showed what's running on FTP. Now, for those not familiar with FTP, basically it is a protocol service used to it's a service used to basically host files and stuff. So, for example, we could maybe host like I don't know we could maybe host like the contents of our website on there. So, for example, let's say we have a website. We want to update some files on it remotely. We can log into the FTP server of the website and update the files, and then they will then reflect on the website, that kind of thing. Basically, FTP is a file share, simply. All right. So, what is next? Gobuster. Now, when it comes to recon, there are really a few different areas. So you're gonna have infrastructure recon. So, for example, if I go ahead and cat here, when we refer to infrastructure, we're talking, FTP, SSH, Windowsy bits like domain services, Kerberos. You don't need to know what they are, but just understand that they're kind of like infrastructure-based stuff. And then you have web app stuff. So, for example, Facebook.com. Now, Facebook.com will have a million different URL paths. For example, if I look over here, we can go to, like, say, get Kali and then hashtag Kali platforms. There's paths, basically, right? Now, let's say that we had a path that was, like, /secret, right? But we didn't want anyone to know about it. Well, in our case, this doesn't exist. But let's say that someone figures out the name of the file which has your secret contents in. Well, then it's gone too. They can read it as well if it's available for them. Now, what you would do in Gobuster or Dirbuster basically is the same. So you will then, like, say, curl some host. So, for example, like I'll try and find an example where there's some nice pathings. I'll use my own site as an example. So if I go over here, so this is a Java application I built. It's still in development, but I was having some issues with it, so I kind of put a break on it. But basically, it runs a Java application, and I'm going to demonstrate a video on how to hack it when I go around to it. But basically, you can see here we have the host, we have the port, and we have this here, test servlet /index, right? If I go ahead and copy this, and I go ahead and curl. Now, curl is a tool basically used to, like, go ahead and get some contents. If I go ahead and run this, this gives me the HTML, which is basically equal to this page here, right? Now, if I were to go ahead and say add -i in there, this basically minimizes the output to only, basically does a header request. A header request basically will just not give me the response to the application back. But basically, if we just do this, we get a 200. If I add a Z to the index, we're going to get a 404. What that means is index exists, but index with the Z at the end does not exist. Now, directory brute forcing will be similar. If I go Gobuster and I hit go ahead and just update this to be the right IP, since for some odd reason the local IP always changes 112. Hit enter. This is basically going to enumerate the system, and it's pulled down two files. There's an admin and there's an index. So when we're looking at web apps, basically we want to perform reconnaissance of, hey, what is running on the web app? What is actually running on the web app? So when it comes to pen testing, honestly, it's a case of following the steps. We want to basically first of all know, what is running on the machine. Okay, if we know there's FTP running, we want to run certain stuff. If there's a web server, we want to run other stuff. Now, again, this video isn't exhaustive, but it's a case of just showing you what you want to do. So in my case, we have FTP running, right? And we also have a script that ran. So I want to go ahead and basically look at the contents, right? And we can replicate this process, right? This anonymous FTP login. And honestly, when it comes to approaching Hackthebox or anything similar, you want to follow the key sets of, you want to know, what is open, what is running, the versions, configs, systems, and service, etc., right? You want to basically know, what is on the box, right? All right, so with FTP, like I showed you before, my Nmap has already given us some insight as to what's running on there, but let's go ahead and do this manually. So it says here, FTP anon, anonymous FTP login is allowed. Well, what does that mean, right? Well, FTP basically, in most cases will require a password. In my case, I can type in the name anonymous and then hit enter, and it will log me in. Basically, what that means is anonymous login will say, hey, you don't actually have to have an email or password. You can just log in and look at the contents, basically. And the FTP, not FTP, the Nmap scan found that. So I've logged in, you know, I've typed FTP, typed in the name of the machine. Let me just exit actually so you can see. Go ahead and type in anonymous, hit enter, and it logs me in. If I now exit out of here and I type in, say, ZZZZ or whatever, and I hit enter, it's going to say user can't log in. The point is we need to use the right username, and in this case, anonymous is the appropriate username. Anonymous. Cool, and now we're logged in. Okay, so now we're logged in, what can we do? Well, much like in a normal file directory structure, we can do like dir, for example, or like ls. To read the contents of the directory, we can do the same in FTP. Now, in this case, it isn't going to work, basically because the way the FTP server is set up, it needs to set certain things. So in my case, I need to say, hey, can you run passively? Type in passive. And then if I now run dir, we can now see the contents. Now, how do I know to do that? Well, first of all, it's experience, and second of all, there's also a help thing. So, you know, there's a number of commands here, and it basically allows us to, gives us an insight as to what commands there are, but it doesn't tell us how to run them, what they mean. So really, it's a case of, you know, reading the manual. So in my case, I realize, oh, I can't read the contents using normal mode. Maybe I can read it using passive mode, and in my case, I did. If I want to go ahead and download the file, I can type in, say, get, and then the name of the file. Say this one. Actually, it's mget. Hit enter, and then it has downloaded. Sweet. In our case, we actually just load it in binary mode. It's not important for HowToHackTheBox stuff, but it's important to understand that sometimes things don't always work the way they should do. If I go ahead and download this now, it should now overwrite the current version, and we should now have a fully binary version. And when I say binary, what I mean basically is when you download things in ASCII, not every byte can be represented in ASCII, so sometimes data is lost. When you download it in binary mode, you download it in binary format, and therefore basically no data is lost, although that may not be true in all cases. And we can see here that file is there. If we use xcg-open to look at it, you can see here it's PDF. And yeah. Okay, so I hope that gives you a rough insight as to, you know, how to approach it. So we have, as I mentioned before, we do the recon. We want to know what ports are open. We want to know, or say we have a web app, we want to run like Gobuster or whatever. Say we have FTP, we want to run FTP. We want to use the appropriate tools. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you this stuff in the next video. But like I say, it's a case of really knowing what's on the box, right? We can use netcat too to also connect to these services. So let's say that we have a service that's a bit weird, right? And Nmap doesn't know what it is. We can actually connect to that manually. So we can say Nmap, say box, and then the port 21, right? And then we can see here that it has replied 220 Microsoft FTP service. This is a banner, right? What that means is basically the machine has replied with a banner when we head to it. If I go to, like, say, port 22, we're going to get a banner for this, right? If I go to, say, port 23, we're not going to get any banner because there isn't a port 23. If I go to, say, like, 389, we're going to get a banner. We didn't get a banner, but we did get kicked off the connection. And that there is a service open, but we can't really communicate with it, right? Because we're not talking the same language it speaks. Okay, so I hope that gives a rough insight as to the starter parts. Recon is a very big area. Next, we're going to look at ports. So because basically recon is so big, there's millions of ports, right? Maybe not millions, but there's millions of services running on various ports. Now, I've highlighted the main ones here. We have, say, FTP, and FTP basically is what we looked at before, basically file transfer protocol. What it means basically is we can view files, upload, download, etc. We have SSH and STP that runs on port 22. In our case, basically what it means is it's basically a remote administration tool. If we have access to SSH on a certain system, we can log in and run remote code. Basically, you know, we can say, hey, what's in the current directory? I want to delete a file, I want to create a file, etc. Then we have Telnet, which is basically the same as SSH but insecure. So SSH is an encrypted version, whereas Telnet is an unencrypted version. It's basically the old version. SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, basically used for like Outlook and stuff, you know, mail clients. We have DNS, which is basically for like domain names. Say I have a host name, I want to basically find the associating IP. DNS is the way forward. We have AT for HTTP, basically web applications. We have 88 for Kerberos, which is basically like saying, hey, do I have authorization to access a certain service? Kerberos will then give you a token. You can then use that token to then say, hey, service, I have access to your service. Give me, give me an access to log into, say, MySQL. Let's say like you have a MySQL service running. You'll say to Kerberos, hey, I want you to give me a ticket for MySQL. Kerberos will check if you're allowed. It will then give you a ticket if you are. Then you can then use that ticket to then authenticate to say MySQL with it. NTP, Network Time Protocol, not a very common thing that comes up in engagements. However, it's worth knowing. Basically, it just says what time. It basically stores what time it is. So a lot of servers can sync up to the same time. NetBIOS, that's basically like FTP in the sense that it can store files, but also it's a lot more than that. Basically, NetBIOS can be used for systems to communicate. So if I run, for example, not that one. If I run, for example, move that away, enum for Linux on the machine, it's going to give us a bunch of data basically, and that is on NetBIOS, right? All right. So next we have SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. This one is quite a complicated one in the sense of it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but basically it can be a goldmine for data, for learning stuff. It can be a goldmine for finding information, really. LDAP used for basically it's basically like almost like a directory. It's a directory service, basically a bunch of information about an active directory. And it's almost like a book. You can basically query LDAP and say, hey, I want you to give me information for this particular user, group, object, etc. I advise you look into how an active directory works before you get into this kind of stuff, but basically LDAP is used to query that information. Is there anything else here? I can't see anything. Our login is basically another version of SSH or Telnet, but only uses a username and no password. If you see it on a box, you pretty much owned it, assuming you know the username. See what else there is. We should have MySQL, yeah, through 306. And really, it's a case of just the more things you do, the more services and ports you'll recognize. For example, I know like when I see a port 80, chances are it's a web app. If I say like a port 8080, chances are it's probably gonna be a web app. It's about looking for conventions and stuff, and just kind of learning what is what. And honestly, it's experience. I could go through every single port and explain what everyone is if I knew what all they all were. And it's probably not going to help you, but you actually looking at the ports, Googling them, learning about them is what's going to help you the absolute most. Okay, so next we have, okay, so I actually missed a part. So we have protocols. So I mentioned to you before about ports. We have like, say, Telnet and stuff, right? Well, we have protocols that those services will sit on, right? Those protocols will sit on. The services will sit on. So, for example, DNS is on UDP. UDP is what you would use for like when you don't really care massively about the data. TCP is another one where you do care about the data. Basically, UDP will be like used for like video content, where it doesn't matter if you missed a few bits and bytes, but with TCP you need to make sure you've got all the data, right? Because you obviously don't want to lose data in transit because it could be important. If you only get half an image, you're only going to get half the accuracy, and half the actual data you want, you only get half a face or whatever. Whereas with TCP, it's going to make sure that every single bit and byte is set. Whereas UDP is more of a case of, well, it doesn't matter if we miss a few bits of data, but it's quick. UDP is far quicker than TCP. There's far less overhead. It's important to learn the differences, because if I do an Nmap scan with say just UDP or TCP, then you're gonna get different kind of ports, because different kind of ports run on different protocols. That pretty much concludes the rough reconnaissance guide. So this video isn't exhaustive in the sense of, it covers all the ports, all the things. It's really a case of just learning the approach, right? So just to summarize, really it's a case of, well, all right, so now that we actually can do HowToHackTheBox stuff, we want to basically look at, okay, so what is running the machine? Well, we want to use Nmap for that. Then we want to use the appropriate tooling. Now, this is not exhaustive. This is just a very quick demonstration of what there is, right? And it's a case of really just learning. If you see a port, if you see a service, Google it, see what else, see what tools you could use to talk to it. For example, I was talking to Ike, which is basically VPN, and that's a very weird protocol, weird service. And I had no idea how to talk to it, but after speaking to some people and also doing some Googling, I found a few different tools that gave me, basically in the end, I managed to get past it and managed to get access to the system. But I had no idea what it was before, so honestly, it's a case of just looking at the service, looking at the characteristics, Googling it, and just knowing when to stop and knowing when to start. Really, a case of saying, okay, where can I go from here? What's the next step? So hopefully that gives you an insight really into when it comes to the approaching the reconnaissance, right? This isn't an exhaustive guide. This is simply a guide on the approach, right? And hopefully it's helpful. I did record a video yesterday, but there was no audio, and to be honest, that video was better than this one. But anyways, I will catch you in the next video, and see you soon. Like, comment, and subscribe.